What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another episode of the Right Mindset Podcast. Today, I am joined by two amazing guests. Let's get them to introduce themselves. Nicole, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Nicole Pierman, or just on YouTube, Nicole's Bookish Nook, and I'm a multi-genre hopping writer, self-published writer, I should say. And yeah, that's about it. I'm pretty simple, as you might figure out throughout this interview.
Hey, simple is excellent. Trust me. Meggy, let the world know who you are again.
Yeah, and coming from the other end of the perspective, like I am incredibly complicated. I try to keep it simple, and it just doesn't work for me. I am a screenwriter, and I have turned copywriter. I pretty much will write for almost anything on hire. Right now, I'm doing some animation work that I can't talk about, which I'm excited about, but I can't talk about it. And then I'm also looking into self-publishing. So I'm excited to talk to you too, Nicole.
Oh, wonderful. All right. So we got on one end, we got an author, we got another person who is going from screenwriting to writing books. This should be a fun discussion about the process of writing in general. For anyone who's catching the show for the first time, Meggy's actually coming back for a second time. This is her second go. So this is pretty much welcome home.
I've come home. I think last time I was in my studio, just insane. This time I'm a little more relaxed. We're on a weekend day. So.
Oh, yeah. And I love the aesthetics of the background. So now,
my home. Yes. It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
The big TV is always haunting me. But
yeah, these are my curtains. I don't know why they're there. I've been trying to get rid of them. Before we get the show started, Meggy knows I love to ask a question, throw it out to the table, and then kind of just riff off of it. We'll let Nicole answer first, but let me throw this out. Could you talk about a particular piece of feedback or criticism that you received on your work that really resonated with you and impacted your writing going forward?
I think the funniest one was for my first book. I said flute instead of fife, and someone, all caps, said, "It's fife, not flute." And I'm like, okay. I'm so sorry. I'll change that. Because it was the American Revolutionary War, and I was saying, I said flute instead of fife while they were marching towards battle. I'm so sorry for the historical buffs that and I learned very fast. This was a long time ago. I don't even remember who it was, but it was some reader. I was on Wattpad at that time, and I realized the smallest things will make people rage.
You ruin their whole experience.
Yeah. Be very careful when you use flute and fife or whatever that slight difference, but it's a big difference in history. So.
On a total side note, I had the same experience with reenactment groups. I did not realize how deep it goes. I now have a respect for it. I understand them. I'm so sorry. I did not understand. Now I do. I mean, that's probably just in general, that kind of note. It's very true. In the sense of, it comes to me in all the different forms of writing as well. I have to constantly ask myself, am I doing a service to the fan base? Is this actually what they think of this particular subject? And it does get in the way of creativity, but it also keeps me kind of honest. So, I've had that same kind of note. That's all I'm saying. Just very not the thing, and you're like, oh, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, how do I know before I know? I always get yelled at for mixing up read and read, so they're like, it's supposed to be read, not read. I'm like, I get the spelling exactly the same. So Meggy, the same question, could you talk about a particular
a really straightforward thing that happened to me that actually changed my writing forever was understanding the difference between writing in my tone, my voice, and how I spoke versus thinking I needed to write in a particular way. It was a really early thing that happened to me. And it was really out of frustration. I had gotten a bunch of notes that said this isn't hitting mark. This isn't hitting mark. This isn't hitting mark. And then I just lost it. And I started writing what was in my head and how I spoke about it, and with my sort of irreverent humor. And they came back with, we love this. This is exactly what we wanted. So it made me change like my mindset about what the tone means for each piece, and like what do they really want, and push it a little further and then let them rein me in, as opposed to holding back and then just sounding kind of generic. So that was big.
If I was to summarize that, would you say it was better for you with greater results when you started writing what you wanted to write through your mind instead of trying to write what you thought others wanted to see?
Yeah, in a sense, or more I'd summarize it as, it was better once I just stopped putting expectations on myself to please the listener.
Yeah.
Once I just started going for it, whatever it was, and just saying, blah, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to say this crazy thing, and then letting an editor or creative director or somebody on the writing team come back and go, hey, pull that in. So much more creativity happened than when I, as a person, was like, well, I'm going to write this exactly as I think they want it, and so that's a different thing. I don't know. It's a little bit of trust in yourself as a writer, but it's also just like getting away from this idea that there's a perfect way to say anything, because there's not. It's not there.
And you bring up a really interesting point with having people come in and adjust your work. And now, when for novelists, authors in particular, like one of our biggest fears is someone's going to come in and just completely rip apart the whole core of what we wanted. And throwing it to Nicole, have you ran into that situation where an editor or someone looked at it where they wanted to publish it or work with you, but they kind of tore at your book and it made it better, but you fought them on it?
No, I haven't fought edits before. I have a great editor, Sarah at Korn. She does the editing for Grimdark magazine for a lot, not all of the pieces, but a lot of them. And then also she's a self-published writer, and she helps indie and not self-published, traditionally published writers. So she knows what she's doing. And I know after a certain point that I keep reading it over and over again and writing it and editing it, and I can tear it apart all that I want to, but that doesn't mean that I know what to fix about it after a certain point. Because for my first book, that took like 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't write that slow anymore, but it took a long time because I didn't have any idea. And then I finally got an editor and they were like, just change this stuff and here you go over here. But that was after I had a bunch of beta readers to fix stuff. And then I also I grew up. I think when you start writing when you're younger and there's no plans of publishing, it's a little easier in a way because you start out creatively, and then you might get feedback that you like or you don't like from family or friends, which my grandmother did, but nicely, so, but constructive criticism from your grandmother is not as bad, and it's still there. And I knew that it was with love. So then I just kind of increased that up to now an editor that works with hundreds of writers and with a magazine. So it doesn't hurt my feelings. I rather have a book that is solid and things needed to be changed to make sense versus creating a bad piece of art and then I turn into a product and now I'm getting 1 or 2 stars and saying that this sucks, because I don't want that. That would hurt way more than a one-on-one with my editor saying, okay, just fix these 2 things. And then the story itself will be better off. That was with my 3rd book. She said, this whole plot does not make sense. Did you just, it was like, did you pants that? I'm like, I pants everything, of course. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't need to be there. And I rewrote the whole second half. But then I looked at it and I said, oh, that's way better. and it makes more sense.
Now, going off of that, Meggy, what would you say to a new writer or author when it comes to letting go of holding on so tightly to the conceptual ideas that first come out of you and allowing a team to come in and give that advice to change things and organize things? What kind of advice would you give to the people?
Well, I think there's a couple of things here, and one is really important to talk about, which is that writers aren't a one size fit all. Like the way that Nicole works, the way that I work may be very different. I'm a special case because I didn't come into writing wanting to really be a writer. I wasn't the kid that at a young age really wrote a lot or did anything. I didn't. I told lots and lots of story. I was really big into visual storytelling and photography, but I came in through a different door. So the reason I ended up writing was because the machine is what the machine is. And eventually I wanted to be in the front of that, not in the back of that. And so that's what started to get me to tell story in that way. So with a new writer coming in, that's why I was so easily adjusted and could push and pull, is that I kind of came in under the idea of filmmaking as a team sport. So it's a little different because I feel like some writers are more like tennis players. They like playing solo. Some writers are very much like soccer players. I just happen to be the soccer player type. So I don't know that it's right for every artist to do it the same. But if you're someone like me who doesn't mind adjusting, probably why I walked more towards things like commercial writing too, like in copywriting and advertising, it's that I don't mind it because I know there's a common goal we're all trying to get to. And just like Nicole said, if someone else can give me honest feedback about whatever I'm doing, at least I know if I'm getting to where I thought I was going or not in the eyes of at least that particular human being. Sometimes I don't agree. I've had adjustments with people that I've fought very strongly for my POV, and sometimes it works, and sometimes they're in charge of the project and they change it. So it's only, I figure they're paying me as much for my words as they are for my ability to stand up for what I think the piece really needs. I've stopped really big snafus, and honestly, they've ignored me and created them. So it just depends on the piece.
There's a really great story about Young Frankenstein with Mel Gibson and Gene Wilder, and Gene Wilder wanted the putting on the Ritz scene, Ritz, that scene, and Mel Brooks was like, I don't know why this scene's here, like I don't think we need it, and it was Mel Brooks said it was the first time in their collaborative history that Gene Wilder was screaming at how important that scene was. And then after he finished screaming, Mel Brooks said, okay, we'll leave it in. And then Gene Wilder's like, you're not going to push back? And he's like, well, you're passionate about it, so I trust you. And it was one of those, and it's the scene, when you're, it's like, can you see that movie without it, right? So, that brings me to taking what you said and leapfrogging back to Nicole. Have you ever had a note given to you where you felt so passionate about its purpose that you fought to keep it in and work it so it made sense?
No. I write pretty clean because I just am a little obsessive and a bit of a perfectionist. So, and I put like what I do, and I see other writers not do this, which is totally fine. But if something is not needed in the book, then I don't put it in. So you see a lot of writers, traditionally published and self-published, that will say, this doesn't need to be in the book, but I want it to be in the book. I am not into that. Like, and usually it's like flirting banter for 10 pages.
And only 10 pages.
I know, or like, just it's too much. And I'm reading it and I'm like, does this need to really be in here? And I see it for all genres. Like, there are some, scenes in a lot of horror books that are like 500 pages long. Does a horror book need to be 500 pages?
No, Stephen King.
Yeah, I don't know at this point. And no, well, I was like in a book club that I'm in, someone's reading a Stephen King book, and then they said, "Oh, this point of like the action just is getting good," and then there's like a huge chapter about some side character that no one really cares about, and they're like, "Why?"
We need to know that they're buying sneakers.
Yeah, why? Like, I would like to know why, and that it depends on the person, of course, but I tried doing that and I read my work. I'm like, that's not good. So I made a rule for myself. If it doesn't need to be in the story, as in there's no point or there's very little point, then I'm taking it out, and it seems to have worked.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the thing that was happening with that book where I rewrote the second half. It didn't need to be in there. That character is strong enough. She doesn't need a magical power. It just doesn't. She does not need magic to have self-worth. So it became a historical fiction novel instead of a historical fantasy novel, and
Mm-hmm.
it stands fantastically as historical fiction. It, sometimes throwing magic in there, which a lot of people do, doesn't need to happen. And I learned that the hard way because my editor wrote a huge, huge email. She's like, "Cole, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but," and then like 5 paragraphs. I'm like,
So
"I get it.
no magic.
Okay. All right, yeah. I'm gonna fix it." And she's like, "Oh, thank God. Oh, I thought you were gonna scream and curse me out because I've had that happen before." I'm like, "No, I trust your opinion." And as I said, it's a better book. I don't think I would have liked, or my readers would not have liked, keeping in that magic. It was not necessary, basically.
So what you're saying is, for male authors out there, they don't absolutely need a female chest plate armor to go just above the navel and leave their midsection completely exposed so we can see their pierced belly button. Is that what you're saying in a medieval setting?
Yes. Yeah. There was another conversation about that with some friends, and I'm thinking at a historical fiction perspective. No,
No.
it doesn't work. Okay, not completely true, because the Celts specifically, they would run down a hill naked to scare
the
people off.
berserkers.
Okay, different, little different. Okay, but if you're putting on armor, if you're that type of army, military, whatever you want to say, that does want to be protected with armor, then a cutoff just doesn't make sense. That might be a hot take, but I think it doesn't make sense historically. I have not really seen that. So you do see it, like, what is it, the King Arthur with
Keira Knightley.
it looks great, but does it make sense? No.
She's still gorgeous to cover up. Yeah, well, then she's dead in the middle of a battle. So, like,
I want to be alive. That's what I want. Just cover me and give me a shield and give me proper weapons so I can defend myself in this very big battle. I don't.
Give me a gun in the future.
Yeah.
Now, Meggy, going off of the idea that so, like Nicole's saying, basically she's able to look at it and she has her rules to say, all right, this is not needed, let me change that. What are some things that you utilize that is almost filled with advice for starting authors that helps you determine when something needs to be taken out? It's not working, and this is the rule for me, and this is how I acknowledge it.
Well, look, it's not just starting authors. Like, I've met authors that are very, very deep that don't do reductive, and the reality is I also start with too much and I pull back and I ask myself on every single line, is this needed? That's a huge part of writing in general, is writing lean. My script writing, when I first started, a lot of people were comparing it to other script writers who are notorious for writing incredibly lean script, because I would almost say I put in so little that it was questionable to some degree. And I mean, Charlie Kaufman's one. If you read his scripts, I mean, nothing's in there. It's literally up to the team, and I think that that's the best way to write a script. And I'm always gonna stand by the less you give, the more the rest of the team gets to do. However, novel writing, other writing, that's different. I think what you really have to come to terms with is, why are you putting it in? You guys just talked about a bunch of things that are male gaze oriented. Okay, cool. Are you doing that because this has a particular tone that needs to satisfy a male audience, and that needs to come with a perception of this person is sexualized? Okay, I mean, I'm not saying I want to promote that, but that might be out there. And the other side of that is, if you're writing a novel in which your characters are robust and real and truthful, then that has a lot to do with what you think that is, or what your gaze is, you know? I'm pretty sure that Nicole and I could go into a battle and both of us would not care about our hair. Like, that's just what I'm thinking. Like, I'm just thinking we could do that. But I mean, you know what? There's women out there who do want to care about those things and do want to show up sexy and don't care as much as if they're going to live, because they've got another strategy, you know? Yeah. I mean, so I can't knock anybody, but at the same time, I feel like new writers, the best thing they can do is really ask themselves, what am I actually writing? Who am I actually writing it for? And does this even make sense for that story? Like, what is it that I'm trying to tell? Because something that's totally ridiculous for one story is completely appropriate for another. I agree of taking out magic when you have a historical fiction novel, and it's completely great, just as it is. That's too much. It's another layer. But at the same time, you know, if you want to write that story and that story is all about the magic, like, do it, but then don't put in the historical fiction. Like, it's like, pick a lane, stay in the lane, make it as simple and as straightforward as possible, so your reader does understand, even if that end road is incredibly complex, you know? Mm-hmm. And to be fair, study a little copywriting, because that shows you real quick how you can say a lot, you know, in just a few words. And that will change a writer's opinion of also how they edit themselves, I think. But that's just me.
And to follow up on copywriting, because you've said it a couple of times.
Yeah, because I've been doing a lot of it lately.
Yep. Can you define copywriting for those listening and who want to understand that?
Sorry, yeah, it's another aspect of writing. I actually think it's good to talk about it in the context of bigger writing as well, because the whole industry has changed. So copywriting can be everything from a conceptual idea down to a few words that you see on a billboard. It can be everything from writing an email for a business to something that is absolutely creative, and none of those words are actually ever going to be seen by the people on the other end. Right now, a lot of filmmaking writers, and I'm sure novelists as well, but especially filmmakers that were writing in the filmmaking world, because our whole world of new media is getting so mushed up.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us are going into copywriting in addition to writing for film and television. And the main reason is just because we're getting so jumbled. Like, there's these little mini movies. It's not really advertisements anymore. I mean, advertisements are always kind of that, but we're making it sort of more oriented towards filmmaking. There's episodic things that are happening. There's YouTube. There's a lot of new media. So it's all getting kind of blended into this monster beast. And copywriting is a part of that. So I just bring it up because I have been doing it since I was a small child. And then I have leaned into it much more now. But I could turn around tomorrow and lean back into script writing as a thing. I think that's part of the versatility of coming at writing from the angle of, again, coming first as a filmmaker and then a writer. I think it's different. So,
yeah.
And I do think you should speak to those writers as well, because I'm as equal as a writer as the next guy. It's just that door is a slightly different door.
And, you know, bringing up, you said YouTube. What is that? No,
just, right.
You can go into.
Yeah. Well, there's so much, right? So will tell you there's like a whole bunch of things, and there's channels you can write for, there's avenues you can go through, it's all getting kind of pushed under different helms. You know, who knows what the future will bring. Right now it's a bit open. There are writing jobs out there that aren't the normal writing jobs people are looking for, especially if you're a new writer.
Oh yeah, and I'll throw on to that. It's, you know, a career as a writer is that I make a living as a writer. It doesn't matter if I'm writing my books or, you know, the majority of my income from writing comes from developmental editing, or someone's hiring me to write their script or novel, or hiring me to refine it. And I get to work on my stuff on the side, but it's like now I'm not stressing that my book has to sell, or I'm stressing that somebody has to buy my script. It's just nice to be able to write. And you make a great point, especially for authors trying to get into the industry as an author. Is like sometimes copywriting may not be what you want to do, but it pays the bills, and you're getting to use your craft, you're getting to practice, and you're getting to build your brand and your network with people you're meeting. So
Well, and to be frank, copywriting can be, I found, more creative than script writing. And that's controversial to say, but it's real. I mean, the truth is, like, I have way more control in the world of advertising than I do in the world of traditional film and television.
Yeah.
My voice, if it's not my project, is needed, and it's very valuable, but it's not the same as being super in control of like an account that is 100% your ideas that you are speaking directly to a client and adjusting. The same thing true for YouTube writing. I mean, a lot of times it's you and some editor that's saying yes or no to whatever you're writing, and it can be a miniature TV series, you know? I mean, so there's a lot going on. I think the old style thinking of it in these very narrow ways should just be obliterated by people. And there shouldn't be this, oh, well, I don't want to be X, I just want to be X. It's great. And I'm not even going to say, like, if you can get it, you should take it. I'm going to actually say, like, even getting it boxes you in. If I would have done what I started doing at USC and what I got the most popularity for, all I would be doing is writing psychological thrillers. I am incredibly glad that I don't write psychological thrillers.
Psychologically speaking.
Psychologically speaking.
That's thrilling.
I'm really glad for me I didn't get boxed into that, because I was just writing.
Yeah.
You know,
now, you did mention YouTube, and Nicole, you have 6 years, I believe you were saying. Before we got onto the recording, you've had a YouTube channel for 6 years. Do you script out your videos, or do you riff? How do you utilize your writing to add value to your YouTube channel videos?
It's really all for fun. So if like fans want to get to know me more, then that's really why I have a YouTube channel. It's not really, my goal isn't to do the YouTube as a writer. I'm what you would call a booktuber, so I really do a lot of reading and then review the books that I enjoy. I don't review books that I don't like. Because if I don't like something, I'm not wasting my time. I'm gonna DNF it, or I'm gonna, do whatever, and I'm gonna move on to something that I like. Controversial, because like those reaction videos, I don't do those either. Or like hate reading or rant reviews, I just don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rather do a happy, I love this book so much, and I'm just randomly talking.
You're just riffing. You're riffing off of
I'm
it.
just doing whatever I want to do in the video or say, and there's a lot of like for the books that I really enjoy. But and so like that has, if I was looking at it in a like to grow my channel and to like live off YouTube, then that is a hindrance, because I don't do anything negative. What I would say negative, but that's just not what I want to do personally. And I've said this many times, and I haven't gotten, flack for it, but you do you. It's not my business what you do on your channel, but I don't want to be a YouTuber.
Yeah.
I want to be a booktuber, So I'm doing what my fans like, and that means I get less views, just how that is, but I get pretty good responses and feedback, and I've made close friends, and I think that's really important for me personally. So I have fun with YouTube. I also have fun with writing, but it's just a good way to come together and talk about things that you love and you enjoy, because I think we're missing a lot of that lately. And I used to be a very negative person, um, very pessimistic, very angry.
Yeah.
Um, I know what that does, and so to you psychologically, so I don't do that anymore. I'm really, and I'm that's actually switching, into doing urban fantasy with a new pen name. I'm having a fun time with urban fantasy, whereas my other books were it's all about war and PTSD and
Mhm.
what happens there. That's what I was going through, and that was a very healing process through 6 years of very intense therapy.
Mhm.
Um, and they're all my book babies, and they're very important. But sometimes when out of the healing process, you just want to have fun.
Oh yeah.
And you're happier and you want to share that. And that's what's kind of more reflected in my YouTube channel and now going into urban fantasy. Having a fun time with magic. Now I can write about magic and it makes sense. And the whole, well, yeah, urban fantasy.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, it's there in the title.
And two things based on what you brought up. The first is, what's great about your YouTube channel is writers need to read, right? So writers read, and you're reading, and then you're like, well, let me make some value out of my reading too, on top of the enjoyment of it. I'll talk about the book, because by talking about it, I'm learning myself. I'm learning what works and what I like and what's important, and maybe someone else will hear those elements. So that's really lovely that you give your time to the audience, and in a positive way. I think that's just a beautiful thing. But to your pen name, I'll bring up Anne Rice real quick. She wrote under a pen name when she was writing more, I guess, erotica and and other styles of books. And when she first wrote, she used a pen name, and then she changed to a real name and stuff like that. Um, is there a deeper reason for the pen name change, or based on what you're saying is that trauma that you worked through to write those other books, you used your given name, and then is it because this is like a new chapter, no pun intended, for your journey as an author, or is it something you're going to do for other styles of books?
No, it's actually more about the Amazon algorithm.
Okay. Can you
So
tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, so it will be extremely confused, and it would be a detrimental decision, because the Amazon algorithm has figured out I do historical stuff, and I also have for chat books, which technically I should have separated them, but I did not. I didn't, and because I just put it together. um, and that mixture is even a little, you know, the algorithms are trying to figure out where to show my books. And so urban fantasy, there's not really crossover for the stuff that I have. And if I put the 6 books that I have planned out, but if they do well, it can be continual. Then if I do sequel to that 6 book series, that's another 3 books. And then there's a possibility of another 3 books in that same world with side characters moving into main characters. Let's just say I have 15 to 20 books,
Mm-hmm.
just urban fantasy. Where are the other 7 books that I worked my butt off for? They're going to go down into the algorithms, and they're never going to be seen, especially if the urban fantasy becomes popular. Let's say that's going to go all to the top when we look at like a author sales page. Um, that stuff that is more popular goes all the way up, and then the stuff that is not goes down. And do I want to have all that work just pushed down?
Mm.
People can't find it that want to find historical stuff and poetry. No, so it's separating them. But I am working with a writing coach in Brian Cohen's ad school, which I'm part of, and I was scared to even bring it up, but I said, tell it to me straight. Do I need to separate these? Because I could possibly, in 5 years, write another historical fiction, and it would be book series. I have it in mind, but I'm planning like 15, 20. We're going on and on, maybe 30 urban fantasy books. I'm have an inkling this is not going to work under one name. What do you think? And she's like, you got to separate them.
Yeah.
Do you want everything for what I said? Do you want the algorithm to be confused, and then your books are just, it's not going to be shown. Amazon is just going to be confused. The readers are going to be confused, and then it's going to putter out. And or you could do a pen name, and then it outright knows just urban fantasy. Show it to the urban fantasy readers. That is a win already. You don't have to work as hard as putting everything under one name. And then the whole thing of the other ones are just going to be forgotten. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
So it's really a business decision. And I was scared. I'm still scared. But she's like, I will walk you through it. You're not going to be alone in this. And it's actually gotten simpler. And you can connect both. Mm-hmm. So people know, but just for algorithm's sake, it will make much more sense to do that.
Plus a website, but go ahead, Meggy.
Yeah. Oh, I was just wanted to add on that even before algorithms, I was doing this. There's a bunch of me's out there. So, I did it for a business decision as well. It's like certain things don't make sense to people when they're looking for a very short soundbite about what you do. The only reason I have now continued with my name and pushed it into that realm of like blending them is because I know that that's actually something that we're looking for now. But like, I don't think it's a bad idea. And I think you're right. You can tie people back into the things you want to tie them back into. It's not hard to figure out what my other names were. You know what I mean? Like, but it's also like not something that's me necessarily anymore. I don't film things anymore. So my world is different now. You know what I mean? So I don't go on and do that part of it anymore. So it wouldn't make any sense to promote that. So I think that's a really good piece of advice for people. And actually I learned something too from you, Nicole, in the sense of what exactly are you doing it for? I did it for a totally different reason, which was just, I can't get any more gaffer calls.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore. So, and it's just that. So I think that I think also too, that you asked a lot about young writers, and my experience was when we met was even actually just kind of pumping young writers to make them really kind of believe in themselves. Mm-hmm. It's a big thing that I really think people need to do. And one of the reasons I do that is because you have to punch that imaginary version of what this job is if what you want to do is do this job. You have to beat it up, and you have to stop pretending, I guess, or you have to stop illusionarily believing this is the only way, or your Uncle Bob told you this is how you do it. And the reality is, I think people that have come to you are trying to do that. And that's why we're here too. But I'm just saying, I think that was really great to hear from Nicole, and also to echo from me for totally different reasons and to echo from you is that writing is about having someone give you $1 for words that you make.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. How you get there, there's 1,000,000,001 different roads with 1,000,000,001 different outcomes. And you got to make those decisions. But if you're doing it for recognition as a writer, that's a good thing to remember, is that you may have to switch it up. You may have to do a pseudonym. You may not want to start out with your original name. You may want to start out with a pseudonym because you don't know how it'll go. There's a lot of reasons to make choices that you make. So, and we're in a world where they can find out anyway. So get used to it.
I almost went with the pen name pseudonym. So
funny. Very nice. Very nice.
One of the things that I noticed, because I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and I started in music and stuff like that. And some of the bands I would consult, or musicians, it was always funny because their careers would never go anywhere because they never wanted to make that step into the music industry. They only wanted to make money writing and performing their music. And I tried to explain to them with great detail that Lady Gaga is Lady Gaga because she started as somebody that was an assistant, and then an assistant to the writing process, and then a top line writer, which is just the like the melodies. Sorry. And she continued to grow her network and her brand within the industry, which led them to, and what's crazy is they didn't think she was quote unquote marketable because she wasn't pretty, which is ridiculous. And that's why her first career stint, they covered her face in videos and performances, and they made, right? And then that's why she wore that meat dress, because she was like, I'm not a piece of meat. I'm more than that. And she made a stance that, and she made her name. And now she's Lady Gaga. Now she's acting, and she's doing all these other things, and she's really bringing awareness to certain subjects. And none of that would have happened if she's like, I have to say no to every opportunity unless it's for the song I wrote for me to perform. And I think that's something that authors starting out or have been doing it for a while and haven't seen any results should reevaluate their career path and say, I can still write my novels. I can still write my novellas. I could still write my poetry. I could still write whatever. But if I want to make a living as a writer, what are other things I could do that allow me to use my craft and get my name out there and get involved with people and build these relationships? Which would lead to Stephen King, Brandon Sanderson, R.R. Martin, who wrote television. He was a TV writer before it was a TV writer that we know him for. He wrote for like those like police shows and stuff back in the 70s. And he was a sci-fi writer, and he did all these things. And I think that between Nicole and Meggy and everything you're saying, it's like, we're not just what we do. And if we just live by that, we won't see our careers grow. We have to expand our horizons, one might say, but it doesn't mean you don't have to write your books,
Well, and one of the greatest pieces, I think, of art imitating this exact conversation that we're having is Charlie Kaufman and the adaptation film. It's a great look. It's Nick Cage, and it's a million years old now, but it's a great look at that idea of, are you a commercial writer? Are you this writer for inner purpose and inner whatever? And it was really Charlie Kaufman himself struggling with kind of that, because he had done things for fun and then for sort of camp. And then now he was this serious, heavy writer, and he had to keep producing the hits under that name. And so I think that that's like, it's not really the same anymore. It's slightly different. And some of those arguments are null and void, but people who are just starting out, especially, go and watch some things like that. Cause that's a bigger debate. It's been a bigger debate for a long time. So.
Yeah. cause I sit at my typewriter for hours going, do I want to, maybe if I just get a bagel first, if I get a bagel, no, I'll write the one page and then I'll go get a bagel. Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite scenes of that movie, when he's just like, the protagonist. No, I feel hungry.
I also love him going back and doing all the things you do when you're young and trying to redo them, because I've done that. I've literally gone to you. I've written for some pretty major stuff. I've worked some pretty major brands, and I have literally gone to YouTube and been like, how do I write a story? Let me start from scratch, and I do it all the time. I feel like every time I write something, it's the worst. Every time I review it, I can't believe that I wrote that, either good or bad. Like, all of those weird doubts and whatever are all swimming around, even in the most accomplished person's brain. And on that tip of like, you do what you want to do, but you also have to keep in mind that you got to eat. It's reality. It doesn't mean that because you have to eat, you have to compromise yourself or even your artistry, but you just have to keep that all you have to keep the understanding that that's all part of it, even if you choose whatever you choose.
And that's a strong point to make when it comes to the reality that, like, even if you are a copywriter, you choose what you agree to. So if you don't want to write for a brand that you don't personally believe in and it doesn't reflect your views, you can say no to that. And an example of that is we turned down thousands of dollars from Budweiser because I don't drink. I don't care if other people drink, and I don't judge people for drinking, but I don't drink. So if I had done this thing where we were sponsored by Budweiser, I would be promoting something I don't believe in. And that is a disrespect to my brand or the people that look to me for that purpose, that, oh, he doesn't drink, do drugs, he has never smoked, like I can do that and be in music. Like, so you have to be conscious of your decisions because it
I
affects, you know.
I just turned down a humongous job because the ask was that I market something to a particular segment of the population that I think it's very unhealthy to market that product to that part of the population. And once I found out what it was about, I went, oh no, thanks though. You have a good time. Like, I hope that you figure out whatever you're going to do, but I think all of it's a mistake. And I decided to walk away. And the only way I could get there was I have done all these things and I have saved enough and I've done enough that I can kind of walk away from that.
Mhm.
But it's hard. It's hard to make those choices, especially when you're new. I would say never compromise who you are. Like, don't do
Yeah.
things you don't want to do or that upset you. For me, copywriting is amazingly fun and great. I've never thought that it is the downstep that a lot of writers want you to believe it is. I think there's a little tiny bit of weird envy in that because it's usually paid really well.
Well, yeah, it's marketing.
That's a small thing. Yeah. But I also think too, like, we are in this new genre. We should all take advantage of this and infuse, because authenticity, like that kind of voice, having a truth to what you're doing, and also standing up and only doing what you want to sell. That is really honestly part of, if you think that script writing itself is not selling a product, I've got some things for you to read, because that's untrue. Right now, anything outside of the independent system is literally run by the big business. And there is plenty of what we think is traditional script writing, storytelling, that has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with promoting an ideal, a brand, a vision. It is what it is, but that's all part of it. So,
And to jump off of one of the things you said about, you have the freedom to do it because you have money saved, and that's something that actually changed my career when I was in the music industry, because I was just trying to make money, so I always had to work jobs. So I decided to take a year off of music, and I got 3 jobs, and I saved up enough money to basically cover my overhead for 18 months to 2 years. And then I just focused on getting in the industry. So I was volunteering my time. I was around record labels, recording studios. If bands needed me to help them with their rig, or if I just did anything just to get involved. And that propelled me to make more money in the industry. I wasn't making money per se on writing songs, but I was making money on writing other people's songs or recording. And writers can do the same thing. If
I was
we
a casino pit boss to get to USC for 2.5 years. And I have used that knowledge. And I think as a writer, you have to live. If you're not out there living and doing a bunch of weirdo jobs and like literally like, I don't know how I'm going to eat, like that didn't happen in any way, shape, or form to your life, I think that's a mistake. And if you can't get that because of your life circumstances, you were born into wealth, you just have had easy street all your life, then go out and meet and talk and actually understand people who didn't have that experience. Like, do something to live. Don't just sit in the room and imagine. That's like so tempting, but don't do it.
I actually want to take what you said and jump to Nicole real quick. Sorry about that. When it comes to experiences and writing, are you a author that specifically focuses on writing things that you have experienced, or do you like to touch on things that are sort of outside your wheelhouse?
I have not been to war, but I know a lot about it. So I like to write what I know, just because that's comfortable for me. And then I also don't have to do years and years of research. That happened with the first historical fiction novel, but then I got the hang of it and I knew where to go and knew what questions to ask Google, for example, instead of just like, I don't know what's going on. And then, the whole day just trying to figure out how to word a specific sentence to get the right answer that is not Wikipedia, because I'm not trusting Wikipedia with, historical needed fact. But once I got the hang of it, then the other historical fiction novels were easier. But yeah, for the most part, I like writing what I know, though I don't know exactly what that means 100%, because if, like, I'm from DC, so I know all about the city life, but I'm also basically all of my family is from the country. And I visited there, but I didn't live in there. But it's pretty, like, yeah, there's some stuff that if you didn't know anything about the country, then you would be like, that's not real. No, it's real. But like, um, it didn't happen to me, but I saw it happen. So I don't know. I guess there's that difference of, does it need to be happen to me, or could it be also what you see and what you hear? I guess that would, because if it's just what I have been through, no, that would be a lie. Especially the war thing. No, I don't know. I have had military members, and then my fiance is in the military, but that is very close. So I think it depends on what someone would think of.
Well, it's a peripheral experience of somebody going through the same thing. And, you know, one of the things I always try to explain to, especially new authors, you know, clients and stuff, I'm like, look, when they really tell you, write what you know love, you know loss,
Exactly.
you know, and it's the emotional truth that you know. And if you don't understand that emotional truth, it's not going to make sense on the page. But the background of how those emotions play out, you have tons of freedom. And I've always thought it was weird where they're like, you can't write that story because you don't know. And you're like, but they're blue aliens on planet Zhuang. Like, why am I not allowed to write about this? And it's like, well, because it feels like you're writing about a native culture. And you're like, all cultures have a native element because we started as not the traveling seekers of new land, the Nomen, right? So it's like, if I write about a planet that's billions of miles away, completely made up, and there's elements based on what we've seen, that's just the aesthetics. But the emotional connections between those characters is what we know. We know a child dying at birth. We know a love loss. We know a parent being taken from us. We know these are things we're allowed to write about.
Well, and also as somebody who has like a background to a particular thing, I think we kind of touched on this before, but you know, I'm part Native. I'm from Oklahoma. I can tell you some stuff that really happens that, again, just like Nicole, nobody will believe me. I actually had someone just very recently, an editor, tell me that I couldn't write a particular scene because that wouldn't happen, which was somebody on a horse talking to somebody in a car as they were driving along. And I was like, no, I'm going to argue with you that not only can that happen, that literally is like half my childhood experience of how my parents communicated when they were driving down this particular road. So it is very like subjective. And also too, I think you can write things, you can always be authentic, even if you're writing about things that aren't exactly your experience. Where we all get in trouble is when we try to fake when we try to fake the experience without even having an interview, without even talking to someone, without even trying to understand the perspective. So like in Nicole's sense, I'm not saying don't write about war. No, please write about war, but do what she did in the sense of touch base with some people that have been there or trained or know what that's about, or at least watch some videos. Like, you know, inform yourself, do the work to inform yourself to write, because what you know can also be through this other party. So I think you're right about stick to the things you know as far as the core experience stuff. But yeah, go out and live and figure that out, and then talk to everybody. Literally talk to everybody.
Yeah, would it be fair to say, off of what you're saying, is like there's a difference between writing about a native tribe doing native tribe things versus having characters, and one of them just happens to be native, but the story has nothing to do with the native culture.
I can't write about certain things in native culture because they weren't my experience. But if you want me to write about what my particular experience was, I can do that. But my experience is not this like stereotyped thing that everybody has gone through. It just isn't. I mean, I grew up in a fairly wealthy part of my family, and we would go to the reservation and meet my cousins, and that's like my experience. We would go to Native American things, and sometimes they were very informative to me. I had a grandfather who taught me Native things. I didn't know they were Native, but I knew about sign painting, and I knew about, so my world is all this, and it doesn't fit some sort of weird box. And I have yet to meet that person who lives the trope of whatever that experience
Oh
is.
yeah.
And it's hard because that's not how, even with diversity hires, it's very difficult because a lot of us are in the same boat. I think that's why things like reservation dogs is very interesting, because they're not trying to play these, and that's where we get in trouble. If you're writing about something you don't know, what you do is you just pick these tropes and then you write that generic-y weird version of truth that isn't true. Whereas like you can tell that the authors on that show are literally people who've at least talked to individuals or understand individuals who have had that experience. So, it is what it is.
And there's this show called Psych that's no longer on the air, but it was like one of my favorite shows. And they did this like aversion to like what we expect from things and like culture and all that stuff. And the two main characters go into a Chinese restaurant, and a white character approaches them wearing the traditional garb that is thrown onto the stereotype, and the accent the character used was like, "Could I help you?" Right? They did that, right? And the actual characters call out the character. They go, "You can't do that. I don't think you could do. You're not allowed to do that. What are you doing?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? What am I doing?" But he's doing the accent, right? And then the father comes out, who's Chinese, and he goes, "What's going on?" And he goes, "How can you have this guy here and he's making fun of your accent?" And he goes, "What are you talking about? I adopted him. He grew up in China." And that moment was like, the world needed that, because what we look like doesn't determine our growth, like our history. And if I grew up in China as an infant, I grew up in the China culture, right? Especially if my parents are Chinese and they raised me, like, and for that moment in that scene, I think it really was like, wait a minute, we're allowed to look at these things differently. We're allowed to approach subjects because there's an emotional truth to that moment. And it's not just, as one might do, is like, what's the stereotypical thing to do in this moment? And they like just hit it right on the head, and they were like, they challenged it, and then they just threw it right against the wall. And I thought that was an interesting moment.
And then we also have to watch out for whataboutisms. Like there's the other side of that coin, which is like not everyone who uses an accent is going to be someone who has that particular story. So we all have to be very conscious of the whole thing going around all at once. And I think that's what brings real authenticity to whatever we're writing, right? So
Correct.
I can't write what Nicole's writing. I just don't have the experience. I have very limited military understanding. I would be just talking out of every other person's writing about it. Unless I go and interview a bunch of people. I've never lived in DC. It's a complete fantasy to me. Like, I don't know what that's like. I know what videos of it are like. I know what people say, but I don't have any idea. So I think it would be foolish for me to try to write from the voice of someone who's in that area. But if I am writing a story about something like that and I write it from the perspective of someone who has no idea what they're walking into, I think that's authentic. So
Yeah. And as long as you do your research and you put actual care and appreciation into what you're going to write, and you try to make it, and again, you always have somebody you could go to, find people of that world, of that voice, and be like, is this authentic? Am I insulting anything? Is it not playing right? And that's always an accountable action to really do. Me personally, when it comes to war, I played with GI Joes when I was growing up, so I am an expert
obviously
on the more you know. All right, so we've reached the end of the show, and at the end of the show, I always like to ask a question. This season's question is, and we're going to start with Nicole. You answer it, and then we'll have Meggy answer it. Boom. What is one piece of advice you discovered about writing, either through someone else or yourself, that completely changed the way you approach the writing process? Nicole?
Oh, I would say the biggest game changer, because I was struggling a lot with just finishing the first draft, or just first drafts in general would take too long. It was just keep writing until you have a draft because if you don't have a finished product, then you can't fix it. And if you keep fixing a semi-finished, or like you only have 15 pages, why do you keep going back to fix stuff that doesn't matter, like typos? You're not going to finish the book that you want, and then you can't move forward with any goal. Like, there are a lot of people that I know that they're on like year 5 of this one book, and they're just like, I can't not go back and edit. And I'm like, I think you should try. Because I was there before, and it took 12 years. You don't want to be like me. Don't take 12 years to finish a book. Just, it's going to be crap. Just go forward. And there are a lot of people that will do, like, it's a trick if I don't need to do this because I just can just keep going. But there are some people that will put in brackets, put a fight scene here, and then go. But
Yeah.
they can do more with a finished product than just keep going backwards and backwards and
Yeah,
backwards.
absolutely. That's some amazing advice. Thank you for that. That's really good. And I love the bracket concept. I do that with notation. Like if I'm like work character, that's like a key for me. And then all I have to do is go click, control F and work character. And it'll always bring me to all those spots. And it's good to have those hotkeys and ideas. And that's fantastic advice. Meggy, same question. You need me to reread it or?
I mean, I think I got it. I hope so. I think I retained it. I think what Nicole said is very close to what I would say too, even though it's a little different, which is, get the draft out. For me, I've always found that first draft, not anymore, but in the beginning, I really found that first draft very intimidating. Even the starting point was very intimidating. And I think we kind of talked about this before, but I'm going to reiterate it because it's a really big thing for me, is I will not start writing till I can tell the entire thing on a voice memo. If I can tell it in real time for what I want it to be from start to finish, and I'm not saying it doesn't have to be a novel, but I'm saying if I can't tell the chapter, if I can't tell the piece, if I can't mentally outline it in a way that I can tell the story to a friend, I can't even start writing it. So for me, that was a big one for me, is just like, I agree with you 100%. Just like keep going. But if you're writing it, if literally putting your fingers on the typing keys is problematic for you in the beginning, like it was for me, record yourself telling the story to your best friend. Record yourself telling it to the mirror. Like that is part of just continuously going, is, there are times I just start something out now and I know how it's going to end, so I can do that now. But don't try to do that in the beginning. Don't try to do that when you're still trying to formulate outlines and understandings of things. And don't make it harder on yourself. Just literally do it however gets that story just bleh. And then listen to the recording once you're done. Like I bring up a spreadsheet and I just like pop in everything that I just said. And I'm like, that's dumb. What that? That's doesn't make any sense. That doesn't even tie in. I don't know where you were coming up with that idea. Like, I think being willing to make fun of yourself and laugh at yourself while you're writing too is a big deal. It's not that serious. Like these are words, they change. You can literally delete the entire thing and then no one knows you even wrote it. Like,
and also, like if your first draft is done, you can do a second draft because that first draft still exists. So like if you love that, it's there. You can read it whenever you want. Well, let's clean it up. Let's work it and get it out.
And that goes back into like why you should like sometimes alter things when people give you those suggestions. Is I know that the gut reaction is like, I love this though. Like it has to have the shining purple whatever in it. And I have to have that flower. That flower is so important. And you know what the reality is, if you take it out and you write the draft, what you figure out really fast is, no, it's not. And actually that makes the original draft easier to write the next time, because you're like, well, that didn't really matter. It wasn't really important. And I spent all this time stressing. I can just move it. Let's just do something. You don't have to put all your ideas into one story. You don't have to write about everything in your life under one umbrella. Like it's all kind of part of the same advice of just like you said, Nicole, just like keep punching, keep going. Because here's what definitely doesn't get an editor cool with you is not turning in a draft.
Oh yeah.
Finishing the work. Nobody likes like no work better than bad work. Nobody. So
well, I have to be inspired.
that part. And that's the other thing too, is once you just Again, my thing is like, if you're getting caught up, put a 5-minute timer and tell yourself you got to write a story in 5 minutes. Like, do whatever it takes to stop that mental game of perfectionism before you
Oh
get.
yeah.
That'll
Yeah.
just kill you as a writer. So
No writer in history, including the greatest writers of our time, have ever written a first draft and been like, perfect. It's not, we're not Mozart's with his pen,
and even like the Mark Twains of the world and those people that have that
Yeah.
voice that you can read it and you know it is. Guess what? ChatGPT can reproduce their quote unquote work, their quote unquote voice right now. And the only reason they can do that is because over the volume of work that they've done enough work that it's refined that.
Yes.
But if you go back to their early writings, that's not as refined as it is on the 20th book. It's taken some time. And I'm just saying, like, a bot can reproduce it, or not even a bot, whatever. We'll get into that discussion another time. But an artificial intelligence can reduce it now because it has enough work to look at. If you don't even have the work out there, all these things that we're all talking about, you have no voice that you can pull back in and actually give someone and say, this is authentically me.
And I agree.
Intelligent.
Also, who's Mark Twain? Right.
Yeah, right. I know.
All right, so let's do the goodbyes. Let's Nicole, how does the audience find you?
You can just find me, Nicole Pierman. Keeping it simple, right? And DuckDuckGo, if you prefer. I prefer that myself. Or if you're old school, you go Google. I wouldn't try Bing. I have no idea what would pop up under my name with Bing. I don't know if that still is a thing, but those two main things, you just duck me and Google me. You will find me on the first page.
All right,
I did
perfect.
the SEO pretty well. Is it SEO?
SEO, yeah, search engine optimization.
Yeah.
Her information will also be in the description, but for anyone listening on the audio, it's Nicole without an H. It's Nicole, and Pierman is Pierman. All right, and Meggy, why don't you tell everyone how they can find you?
So right now, here's the thing. You used to be able to find me on Twitter all the time. I'm not on there as much as I used to be. I am literally on LinkedIn. And you know why? Because if you have a job, I'm on LinkedIn. Talk to me and I will talk to you about that job. The reality is right now, I'm not doing a lot of social blast to everything because I am changing careers. I'm trying to figure out what my next moves are. So I say, hey, come talk to me on LinkedIn because I 100% will be talking about whatever I'm doing there. I say secondarily, come talk to me on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram. Under Twitter, it's my regular name. Under LinkedIn, it's my regular name. And on Instagram, it was Meggy was here. But those are my ways to connect with me. I'm not doing anything too fandangled these days, but I genuinely try to get back to anyone that has a legitimate conversation they want to start. I can't always promote other people's work or give them feedback on things that I have, don't have room or capacity to actually look at. But that's how you find me, just in the really basic ways, like you find humans these days.
That's right. And again, her information for her LinkedIn will be in the description below. And you said your LinkedIn is basically LinkedIn / your name, right? So
yeah, I don't know how to, if you look up Meggy Garol pretty much on anything, there's one of me. So there's Meggy's out there. There's like 6 Garols in the world. It's not really my last name. It got chopped in half at Ellis Island, but we can have a whole conversation about that too. Right. There's not that many ways. You can't really, I think, again, Bing, questionable. Not sure what Bing has to say about me, but pretty much everywhere else, it's going to tell you about Enter the Anime, my Twitter account, and my LinkedIn. So there you go. That's how you find it.
Anyone listening with the audio who's driving your car and you want to find her, it's Meggy, Meggy, and Garol, Garol. For anyone who didn't get to see the video of this, I recommend it because Gizmo was literally watching us the entire time. And I was waiting for him. Bright light. I was waiting for that, maybe feed him after 12. But unfortunately, we didn't get that joy, which brings me to my final thoughts as we end the show. Listen, your journey as an author is not going to be the same as someone else's journey. And you need to find what works for you and what you love to do. Writing is not about doing something just to be doing it. find your passion and your peace when it comes to your path as a writer. And as you noticed today, there are many different ways to write. There is a different process for each person. Some of us are outliners, some of us are just, hey, off the cuff pantsers. It happens. And if that works for you, that's your path. So, with that said, as always, you got to keep developing the right mindset. And I'll see you next time. Thanks again. Love you all. Bye.